Hi, good evening, council member.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. We're just admitting folks. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to mute yourself as you join. Oh, we have our guest of honor who's just joined, which is our head of our homeless response team, Peter Radu. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you all again for joining us. My name is Rashi Kesarwani. I am the council member for the Gilman district. And today we have a really packed agenda. As many of you know, we had a meeting in mid-January to talk about street conditions. And this is our follow-up meeting to talk about how to keep our neighborhood clean. I hope that you all have been down to our beloved Gilman district yesterday and today to see the incredible progress that's been made. I want to skip ahead to our agenda here. Can you all see my slides? Okay, so great. So first I want to do intros, and you can see the sort of run of show here, and then I want to turn it over to Peter to give the update on addressing health and safety hazards at the encampments and the status of RV actions and litigation. Then I want to turn it over to Sergeant Rodriguez, who's going to present our city resource guide for responding to criminal activity. And then I have 3 specific strategies that I want to share with you all and get your feedback on for keeping our neighborhood clean. And hopefully we can do all of that before 6 and then have plenty of time to have an open conversation. So why don't I go ahead and turn it over to Peter?
Thank you, Councilmember. I appreciate it. Appreciate your having me. For everybody on the call that I haven't met yet, my name is Peter Radu. I am an assistant to the city manager, and I oversee neighborhood services, which includes, among other things, directing our homeless response team, which is the first point of contact for addressing the homeless encampment situation throughout the city, and which is the multi-departmental team that took action at the encampments along the Harrison Street corridor yesterday morning. So I wanted to just, I'm of course happy to answer questions about that intervention if you should have them, but I wanted to start off with kind of a broader discussion and explanation of kind of where we're at with respect to addressing encampments. And first of all, before diving into that, I want to invite you all to a work session of the City Council on February 15th in the evening, where city staff are going to be giving a deep dive presentation and having a discussion with the council on the intersection of homelessness and mental health in Berkeley, and why our situation is the way it is, what we're doing to address it, and what we could do moving forward to improve our situation, aside from kind of the obvious and obligatory more funding. So I don't want to get into too much historical detail here, but I think some context and some recent history is really essential for understanding the policy landscape that we're operating within, and that kind of constrains us and ties our hands in many ways. So to set the stage for you for explaining kind of where we're at in addressing encampments in Berkeley, I think there's 3 critical factors that you really need to keep in mind. The first and foremost is the most important reason is that because of the absolutely insane and still growing cost of housing and living here, homelessness in the Bay Area, and especially in the East Bay, just keeps going up. We are required by the federal government to do a full count of our homeless population every 2 years. 2019, unfortunately, is the last year for which data is available. 2021, the count had to be canceled because of COVID in last winter's surge, which you all will remember well. But we will have another count coming up in February. so less than a month away. That said, 2019 being the last year for which we have data, between 2017 and 2019, homelessness in Berkeley went up 14%, and unsheltered homelessness went up 22%. Countywide, homelessness went up 43%, and unsheltered homelessness in particular went up 63% countywide. So the numbers are just skyrocketing. And the Bay Area has the highest rate of unsheltered homelessness of any metro area in the entire country. This is limited to, this is due to a number of reasons, but that is kind of what we're facing right now. And so when you have nowhere for people to be inside, they have to exist and they have to be somewhere outside. So the mere presence of people outside is just because we lack indoor options. And of course, that's not for lack of the city trying to address this. And the council and the mayor deserve a lot of credit for putting their money where their mouth is in terms of bringing new resources, but we are decades behind in terms of our need, or in terms of our supply relative to our need. The second reason, with that being the backdrop, a growing population, is that in 2018, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals at the federal level issued a landmark ruling, which was binding on all of the Ninth Circuit, known as Martin versus Boise. And it essentially affirmed that criminalizing homeless people for, quote, the unavoidable consequences of being human, i.e. for sitting or lying or sleeping in the wrong place when they have nowhere else to go, constitutes a violation of the Eighth Amendment of the United States Constitution, i.e. cruel and unusual punishment. So it's really hard to overstate how fundamentally this has changed things in the Ninth Circuit. It means that we cannot close an encampment or displace any of its residents without having shelter beds available for all of them. There's a reason that the West Coast looks the way it does right now. We have a growing homeless population on the one hand, as I've just explained, not enough shelter, as I've just explained. If you think things are bad in Berkeley, I invite you to spend an afternoon in Seattle or Portland or Los Angeles or Oakland. We are all struggling with this. And you may be aware that all those cities that I just mentioned, including Berkeley, are hotbeds of progressive activism. And that this court ruling has absolutely emboldened the activists and the civil rights litigators who are within this community, and who are really kind of circling the waters like sharks, waiting for us to make a mistake as a city. In the less than 6 months that I've been on this job in Berkeley, I've already been involved in responding to and defending ourselves in 2 encampment-related lawsuits. So it's not a matter of if we get sued, it's a matter of when we get sued and under what circumstances. And if any of you have ever been deposed or have had to file a declaration, you know how many hours that takes. And we're already working 60, 65 hours a week nonstop. So another lawsuit just means that necessarily something that you are paying me with your taxpayer dollars to do will not get done. So we really need to be cautious. Litigation is not a reason not to manage our city, but it is a good reason to take our time and to be very cautious for the reasons I just explained. The third of those 3 reasons that I explained that fundamentally changed the game was COVID. And I mean this in 2 very specific ways, not just the way that the pandemic has changed life for all of us, right? There are 2 very specific things with respect to unsheltered homelessness. The first is CDC guidance that was issued in March of 2020 around encampments and responding to them during the pandemic. That guidance is still technically in effect. It had the effect of saying that unless there were individual rooms for every single person in an encampment, you are to leave it be. I have read that thing 15 times over. There are no loopholes. It is very black and white. And at the time it was passed, it made good sense when we knew very little about this virus. And in the ensuing year and a half, it had the effect of grinding everything to a halt. We just sort of turned off encampment enforcement, partially in response to the CDC guidance. The second, and this is arguably even more important, is that we had to cut our shelter bed capacity nearly in half to allow for CDC physical distancing guidelines. So even though our city has moved mountains, and again, I mentioned how much credit the council deserves over the past several years to open new programs, and even within the past year to open the new 50-bed Horizon program and the 40 slip safe parking program down on Grayson Street. we are still operating at less than 60% of our normal bed capacity due to the pandemic. So with all of this in mind, let's put the pieces together when we think about enforcement at an encampment. Displacing an encampment requires, as I mentioned, that we have a shelter bed for everyone. As I've just explained, we know that in Berkeley, we've seen a 22% increase and probably more over the past couple of years in people who lack access to any shelter. We have cut our shelter bed capacity nearly in half since COVID. We then had the CDC come in and halt all of our encampment closures for well over a year. And now that we want to start enforcing again, now that we feel like we've turned a corner in the pandemic, fingers crossed, we have an environment of litigation that requires that we be extremely cautious. So when people ask the city, why aren't you enforcing your sidewalk ordinance? Why aren't you enforcing against encampments and the violations that they constitute? My answer to you is unequivocally that we are enforcing, but that you have to really understand what enforcement means. We must have a shelter bed for everyone. There are very few beds and even fewer vacant beds in our system that are up for offer. So we can really only move as fast as our shelter system allows. Again, we could do that without making shelter, but we will get sued and that will be a drain on your taxpayer dollars. This means that we are forced to, out of necessity, prioritize which encampments we enforce against. And so we prioritize health and safety impacts and also impacts to private residences and places where children congregate. And there have been closures, especially in West Berkeley, where there have been encampments that have really impacted private residences and neighborhoods. And we've been had to prioritize that. And one of the reasons that the Harrison Street corridor really jumped up in recent weeks for us was because of the exacerbation of the health and safety conditions there. So within this extremely constrained environment, where my team and I have really had to perform legal gymnastics and administrative gymnastics every week to get some of even the most basic work done, even within that, we've seen a tremendous amount of success. Since launching the homeless response team in September, which was, again, a team that was created by the council with an almost $1 million budget allocation made last June by the council, we have resolved 11 encampments, if you include yesterday's. We've made close to 200 total shelter offers. We've successfully moved roughly a third of people into shelter. Yesterday's success rate was actually 83%. We've also significantly reduced the footprint of the RV encampment in the Gilman district as well. Throughout all of that time, we've only had one arrest made and we've had no criminal citations that have been issued. So what you saw yesterday was case in point for what's possible, but also I think an explanation and validation for why it took so long. And I want to apologize that you've been very, very patient with us, and I can understand, and I really do feel your frustrations, but I hope you understand why it took us so long and why we need to be very methodical, especially with regards to the outreach and the work we did there. The second thing that I want to mention, and that the council member asked me to address, is the challenges facing RVs specifically. So with respect to RVs, a couple of important points I think need to be made. First, research, as well as my professional experience working on this in multiple Bay Area jurisdictions for the better part of the past 10 years, is that these folks don't think of themselves as homeless. So when we send homeless outreach, for example, and we offer them homeless shelter beds or connections to the homeless system, they decline. And because of our constrained housing environment that we find ourselves in, where even folks that make a comfortable six-figure salary are sometimes grouped up with multiple roommates or multiple families, we are often finding folks that, they're declining what we have to offer, which is typically shared housing with sometimes 3 or 4 other strangers in places that are far away from Berkeley often, because that's what's affordable, like as far away as places like Modesto, Stockton, Antioch. That's quite literally all people can afford. And they're declining that in favor of their RV, which offers them their own space, their own privacy, and is understandably seen as a better option. So people are making rational choices within a very constrained environment. We don't have a lot of good options to reduce the presence of these folks on the street. Our services are voluntary. And as a case in point, there's a reason that the Bay Area streets and some of these other cities like San Francisco and Oakland and San Jose look the way they do with respect to the proliferation of RVs. It's evidence that homelessness has moved up the economic ladder, that folks can at least afford to buy themselves a vehicle as shelter, even if they can't afford housing. And I think it's underscored by the fact that vehicular homelessness is now the modal form of homelessness in the Bay Area. More people live in vehicles than in shelters or encampments across the 9-county Bay Area. I have 2 people living in vans literally outside my street. You can probably see them through the window. And it's just everywhere these days. The second is this. So the second factor that's really kind of constraining us here is the fact that even if we did start enforcing our traffic rules and we are issuing citations again, there was a state law change that was made in 2018. It's AB 2876. And it codified something that was already present in community case law known as the community caretaking doctrine, which states that even if you're in violation of a parking rule, for example, the 72-hour rule, that in and of itself is not necessarily good enough reason to tow a vehicle. The vehicle must also pose some threat to public welfare. And so for over a year during COVID, when for very good reasons, the city manager turned off a lot of parking enforcement alongside many other cities that did the same. We had a large number of vehicles that sort of got very entrenched. And so we have a huge backlog of things to work through, and we're trying to work through them, and we're trying to work with people. We've already moved more than 30 people into the safe parking lot, which is a huge undertaking and takes a lot of time and trust building with that population. But we also know that for many of these folks, simple citations will not change their behavior. And because of this community caretaking law, we aren't always necessarily justified in towing, even if multiple citations have been issued. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage for you there. The other thing that's important is that if you remember that litigious environment that I remembered earlier, that is directly applicable here as well. The action that we took in the Gilman district to address the RVs last September and October resulted in a lawsuit. We were sued. And we are actively defending ourselves against a lawsuit coming from that intervention that seeks to prevent us from doing any parking enforcement against RVs in the entire city. It's seeking a total sort of injunction. So unless we want that to be the outcome, then we now need to be even more cautious in our approach and kind of thinking through things until at least this litigation is settled. So I'm going to stop there. I could obviously talk for hours about the complexities of this situation and how constrained we are in our ability to act. But I know we have a lot of other things to cover tonight. And I hope the work that we did yesterday is proof of concept that we are taking this very seriously and that we are acting. So again, thank you to the council member for having me.
Thank you very much, Peter, for taking time out of your evening to share that information with us. I know people are putting questions into the chat. You should feel free to continue to do that, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can. One question I want to just ask you now, Peter, I think it was Adam who had asked, when you say the action yesterday was 83% successful, can you clarify what you mean by that?
Sorry, yes. What I meant was we take the time before we intervene in an encampment to really get to know who's living there and to build a census of who's living there so that we can do intensive outreach to connect people to shelter and to other indoor actions. Because we know if we don't do that, not only is it legally problematic, but it's just going to push those individuals to another street corner. And it solves the problem for one group, but creates a new problem for another group. So we really try to end this by bringing people indoors. And what I mean by that is of the 18 people that we identified as being sort of regular residents in the Harrison tent and structure encampments, we were able to move, as of yesterday, 15 of them indoors. So that's 15 of 18 is an 83% success rate.
Thank you very much, Peter. I want to turn it over to Sergeant Rodriguez now, and I think she's going to share screen, so she should be able to do that.
Thank you, Councilmember. And good evening, everyone. Just try to share my screen. Wrong screen. My apologies.
We see it now.
Okay, I think this is the wrong. Trying to pull up my second screen here. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Well, that worked. What we just saw.
Okay. It was, you guys can all see the Berkeley Police Department resources?
Yes.
Okay, great, success. All right, hello everyone, Sergeant Veronica Rodriguez, but please feel free to call me Ronnie. Very kind of impersonal and informal like that. Wanted to share with you all this evening the Berkeley Police Department and City of Berkeley resources. Trying to keep this kind of very brief and succinct in this card. This is an informational card with the idea that we want to at some point distribute this card out to, excuse me, at some point kind of distribute hard copies of this card out to all the merchants and community members. And I was able to develop this card in collaboration with Peter and Liz from OED, who's also on this call. The most important kind of number on this first page here is 911. So as many of you know, this is kind of like the direct line for any kind of an emergency that you may have. Another important phone number to be aware of is the BPD direct emergency line. So for those that don't know or are not aware of this number, it's 510-981-5911. Chose not to list this on this particular card because in most cases when you're under stress and kind of this heightened state, it's best to stick with what you know, and when in doubt, you want to dial 911. The next feature of this card is the text to 911 feature, which is a relatively new thing for BPD. We like to say that call if you can, text if you can't. Again, voice communication is always best and the most preferred option. Kind of some essential and specifics regarding the text to 911 feature is you need to punch in 911 and do not use any dashes. You got to be sure to provide the location and nature of the emergency and wait to be prompted for further instructions. And really try to use simple words, avoid abbreviations, and obviously avoid using emojis when you're doing the text 911 feature. Unfortunately, you cannot send videos or photos. It is a text only feature. And at this time, we can only text in English. We don't have translation services at this time. And lastly, the text to 911 feature does not accept a group message format option. The next number here is the BPD non-emergency line. This is used for non-urgent issues that may occur. So those may be any kind of serious crime that's had like a lengthy delay, or the suspect has left and is no longer around you or on scene. This is also to report any type of suspicious or disruptive activity. Or lastly, if you need to file a crime report, such as an overnight theft, a burglary, vandalism, etc. Moving to the crime prevention tips. Obviously, some of these are fairly self-explanatory, but these are largely designed not to scare you or to make you hyper paranoid, but just kind of simply to serve as a reminder for things that we often overlook, and myself included. And even as a police officer, I've, mistakenly left my backpack in my vehicle. Thankfully, I returned to a vehicle that had all my windows intact, but it's certainly something to be cognizant of and to have some kind of like helpful reminder. The next box here is the CSB coordinators. So as some of you may know, I'm the sergeant of the Community Services Bureau, which consists of 4 area coordinators who are responsible for different areas and segments of the city. We kind of assist with any like the long-term systemic issues that occur within the city that cannot necessarily be handled at the patrol level. These area coordinators can also assist with security surveys for your business or residents. They can also assist with any kind of challenging quality of life crimes. You may also see us assisting Peter and his team on some of these encampment closures and operations as we're part of the homeless response team. And it's also kind of important to recognize as well that for the Gilman area in particular, you have 2 area coordinators, which are Officer Alex McDougall. So he covers everything west of San Pablo. And you have Officer Brian Hartley, who has all of the area west of San Pablo. And I'll move to the back side here. So this flip side just contains a number of kind of helpful City of Berkeley resources. It's kind of an additional handy, quick informational guide to be able to report any problem that you may be experiencing. And that about covers it. So, and I'm expecting some kind of questions later on, which we'll get to at a later time.
Thank you so much, Sergeant Rodriguez, for that. I want to, so I have a few slides that I also want to present. I know you all have been waiting patiently. Before I get to my slides, I want to ask Peter Alley's question, which is, you know, can we expect people to return in a few days? Because that has been the pattern in the past. Can you speak to that, Peter?
I mean, I hope not, but if they do, they do. And this cycle kind of starts anew based on what I just explained. We will do our best to remain vigilant in the area and to prevent re-encampment by keeping eyes on the area, by having conversations with people once they set up that, hey, you really can't be here. You know, we just closed this area. At the end of the day, however, that's all voluntary. If they dig their heels in and say, you can't make me leave, then, you know, we are constrained by all the enforcement procedures that I explained. So we do our best to respond very quickly, and we will. We don't want, believe me, nobody wants the work we did yesterday, which was weeks of planning and many city resources to all go to naught. And so we're going to stay vigilant, but there's nothing there's nothing really from a policy perspective that allows us to effectively prevent re-encampment. This is where things, you know, you all, quite frankly, can help out as well, because I think there are changes to the landscape that can be made and changes to the use of the space that we can all think about that will make it less inviting. So, for example, one of the property owners along 9th Street near Harrison, after we did our action yesterday, installed some lighting that will shine down on the sidewalk and stay on all night. And so that will make it less attractive for people to stay there. If you're interested in doing a special event in the street on 8th Street, for example, my division runs special events. So please come talk to me and I can put you in touch with the right person. We can reprogram the space, get community members out there. The more that I think people see that the neighbors and the residents and constituents here care about this and are trying to do our best to reprogram it and repopulate it, the less attractive it's going to be for people returning.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's actually a great segue to what I wanted to share. So let me just advance my slides.
Councilmember Kesarwani, can we
Yes.
just quickly, there were two questions that I thought it might be helpful to have Peter just answer, which is how is the encampment defined? And also just the difference between Albany and Emeryville and Berkeley. Are you open to those questions right now?
Okay, yes. So there is no prevailing definition of encampment. There's no federal definition, there's no state definition. There's varying city definitions. San Francisco defines it differently than San Jose. There's not really a definition of encampment in Berkeley, nor do I think necessarily that having one would really benefit us, because the issue is that the courts are not issuing judgments around encampments. They're issuing judgments around unsheltered homelessness, right? If somebody doesn't have a place to be indoors and they're living outdoors, irrespective of the conditions or you know, whether or not there's permanence or belongings or anything, that's almost immaterial to the argument that they don't have anywhere to go and that they're subject to the same due process, you know, constitutional requirements that all of us are subject to. So there's no, to answer your question shortly, there's no definition of encampment. There's no prevailing federal or state definition. And I don't necessarily believe that having one would necessarily benefit us. And then what was the question about Albany and Emeryville? why there's no homelessness there or any encampments there. First of all, I don't think that's true. There's certainly, like, the area behind the Home Depot in Emeryville has been a continuous problem for not just encampments, but illegal dumping for many, many years. And Emeryville partnered with the city of Oakland to address that. But then there was re-encampment, and it's been an ongoing issue. So it's not necessarily true. There's a whole host of other sort of historical reasons why I believe Berkeley has more of this than places like Albany. But I don't think we necessarily have the time to get into that here. Another reason too is that the county, I'm going to try to refrain from getting too wonky here, but the federal government requires that homelessness resources, which in Alameda, which sort of in our jurisdiction, our federal resources are mostly administered at the county level. So at the county level, the federal government requires that we participate in something called coordinated entry, which means having kind of a single point of access and a way of prioritizing limited resources for people experiencing homelessness. And because of the vast geography of our county, we several years ago, 5 years ago at this point, went through a long community process to come up with regional access points for homeless services. One of those regional access points for the North County is Berkeley. And so we are paid by not just the county, but also by Albany and Emeryville to be that access point. And so, you know, folks are here because services are here, and that's part of the way that we've arranged for that. That is, I think, this community's best interpretation of those federal requirements and the best way to operationalize those federal requirements here. That's not the entire reason, but it's one reason. Just for the same reason we have more students in Berkeley than in Albany or Emeryville, because neither of those cities have a large university.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. I see there are questions that continue to come into the chat, and we will get to them as soon as I just present a couple of slides here. First, I just wanted to show you all the pictures of what occurred yesterday. For those of you who haven't been down to the neighborhood yet since yesterday, the after pictures from last time are now the before pictures. And I just want to really just personally and sincerely thank our city staff who worked for weeks in advance of the action yesterday to make sure this happened fairly and in a way that was compliant with all of our laws. No, you can't compost that. Sorry, that's my son there. So we're teaching him about composting. So, okay, so I want to just get into these three concepts for keeping our neighborhood clean. I've talked with our city manager and some of you all already about some of these concepts, and I just want to present them to you and get your input, with the remaining time that we have. First, I want to say that last time there was understandably a lot of anger and frustration, and we were encouraged to think outside of the box about things that we could do right away to try to ensure that our neighborhood is clean. And I think while the sidewalks are clear right now, what Peter says is true, that people can come back, and that's what we've seen in the past. So I do want to make sure that we're thinking proactively about how we can come together and ensure that our streets and sidewalks remain clean. So the first concept is a pilot concept that we're calling gift cards for trash pickup. This is something that I have had in the back of my head after I read that the cities of San Jose and Elk Grove, which is a smaller city near Sacramento, they both piloted these cash for trash models in which homeless individuals are provided $20 gift cards for bagging trash. We talked to our city staff about it, and they have said that they can provide materials such as tools and trash bags. If this is something that is of interest to you all, we can also explore the ability of my office providing $1,000 to initiate the pilot, so we had funds to purchase these gift cards. I do want to caution that this model does require oversight to ensure success. there's a nonprofit called Untrash East Bay, and they piloted this model at the University Freeway on-ramp and off-ramp areas of providing gift cards to people to bag their trash and place it in a dumpster. And they found that they had to always be monitoring and adjusting, and that, you know, it required that oversight. So I wanted to put that out there, and, you know, we can have a back and forth about that, but that's something to think about, that I am very happy to support that if that is of interest to folks. So I wanted to just, you know, throw that one out there. The other thing I want to talk about is related to some of these prior discussions and efforts that we've had about exploring a business improvement district or a parking benefit district. We can look at seed money for a Gilman District Merchants Association nonprofit. And I can put forward a budget referral for us to get some funding for capacity building so that we could begin to develop a plan to beautify and reclaim the public realm, as Peter is saying, you know, to think about things like public art, landscaping, street furniture, enhanced lighting, signage and banners. So that's, you know, another thing that we can look at, that we can try to get funded in our next budget process coming up in June. And then finally, some other options I want to just mention. We do have a downtown streets team that is paid for by our downtown business association. I think they fund it. I think the city also puts funding into it, and we have expanded it to beyond the downtown. So they also work in the University and San Pablo area. The downtown streets team is comprised of people who were formerly homeless, who get paid to keep the streets clean. So we can look at expanding that to the Gilman district. That would again be something that occurs through the budget process. So that would take some time to line that up. We're also exploring whether we can have additional street sweeping. We've been told that some street sweeping is already happening in the Gilman district, but we don't think it is as robust as it could be. So that's something for us to look into. And then finally, last time, we heard a lot of really valid questions about why the city does not have proactive enforcement of its parking rules. For instance, the 72-hour parking rule states that a vehicle has to move every 72 hours, but the way that the city enforces that rule is through complaints. And so one thing that I am exploring, and I think Sergeant Rodriguez and I have had a conversation about, is, you know, can we have funding so that we could have proactive enforcement of 72-hour parking rules in parts of the city like West Berkeley that don't have other parking regulations. You know, in other parts of the city, they have residential preferential parking that builds in enforcement, but we have certain parts of our city that don't have RPP, may not be metered. So those could be areas where we could look at the proactive enforcement. And just to conclude here, I wanted to show you all some images of what we mean by reclaiming the public realm. I think I showed you all these potted plants on Milvia. These were installed after an enforcement action. Prior to their installation, this sidewalk had tents all along it, and the businesses came together and decided to do this beautification and sort of reclaim this sidewalk here. You also have this parklet in San Francisco. I know a lot of you aren't necessarily operating customer-facing businesses, but we do know that Boychik Bagels is going to be coming to 6th Street. We have field work. We do have some businesses where it might make sense to consider a parklet. So I wanted to show you this. This is just a parklet in San Francisco. And then finally, the last image, this is public art made out of scrap car parts. And we have, you know, businesses in the Gilman district that are dealing with cars. And so I just wanted to put this out here. You know, we could have a public art display a portion of the public sidewalk. That's another way to reclaim the public space. So with that, I want to wrap up. I just want to make two quick announcements. One is that we are seeking volunteers for a Gilman District Coordinating Committee. These are folks who can be more involved in advancing the concept of creating a Gilman District Merchants Association. We already have 6 people who've committed to this group. If you're interested in being involved in that, please reach out to me. You can, put your info in the chat, and we will get you involved with that group. The other question I have for you all is about the 4-hour parking. We've heard from a couple of businesses that it is an issue for their workers because they have to move their car mid-shift. And so, in the time that we have, feel free to let us know how the 4-hour parking is going. I'm open to adjustments. This was a pilot, and we want to make sure that it is working for you all. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and we will try to do our best to keep track of the order of hands raised. Feel free to raise your hands, and then we will also, go through the chat here and try to answer as many questions as possible. Just give me a second here to do some scrolling. So Jonathan is asking, how often are people patrolling the area to move people along? I think that's related to dealing with encampments. And so Peter, do you want to take that?
I mean, we're we're in the area. You've seen our trucks doing garbage pickup at least weekly. We try to do our best to be responsive when complaints come in. That area is one of the sort of largest problem areas in the city, so we do spend a lot of time down there. But I just want to give you all the perspective. In neighborhood services, we have 2 full-time outreach workers. And one of them has been out on an extended leave due to some family-related issues. The other one currently is out because of COVID. So I have serious staffing challenges, and we have an entire city that we need to be responsive to. So we absolutely do our best, but to give sort of a set schedule and predictable times that we're down there, unfortunately, I just don't have the resources to commit to. But we're absolutely responsive, and please do let us know when there's problems, because that's how we know how to prioritize.
Sorry. Thank you, Peter. I want to go to Jody, who had her hand raised. Jody, are you there?
I am.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Jody Morgan here. I'm the owner of Covenant Winery, located at 1102 6th Street. And we're at the very north end of 6th Street. Right next to us is University Village. We've had a large influx of homeless folks move into our area. We're kind of a little out of, the mainstream, but, we do have customers. We host people at the winery. We've experienced some vandalism to our property where we have some very large, powerful electronic equipment. And, I've reported this a number of times. I actually saw one of the lieutenants, a police officer on the street. So, listen, my heart goes out to all these folks, but, now our property is being damaged. A couple of the people have come up to me and asked for jobs, and they've gotten kind of aggressive with me. So I've also felt a little threatened. And more people are kind of coming into that part of the street. So I can appreciate the gentleman speaking before me that he has limited resources. I totally get that. But I really, I don't know what to do. I mean, I felt threatened. My employees felt threatened. Customers don't want to see this. Our property is being damaged. So, I guess I have concerns. I have concerns as a business owner. And, we're part of this Berkeley Drinks District. So I'm very open to, ideas, suggestions, and hopefully there can be some kind of intervention. Because these folks are, some of them are dangerous and they're very much out of sight. You can't really see them. So that's my comment. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jody. And I, that's part of, what you talked about is that's the reason why we have both Peter here, who's representing our homeless response team, and Sergeant Rodriguez to sort of speak to the public safety issues, because I know that many of you have faced both of these issues. And, in terms of public safety, Sergeant Rodriguez has talked a lot about how we are understaffed in our police department. And my goal with this budget coming up in June is to restore police staffing, because right now, a lot of our officers are doing a lot of overtime to try to deal with public safety issues, and it's not sustainable. And so we need to have more officers so that they can have a greater presence in areas where we are seeing an uptick in crime. And I will tell you that, it's been my observation that the last few months, we have heard from more of you telling us that you've been victimized. Cars have been damaged and there's been trespassing. And I just want to acknowledge that we hear what's going on. We want you to report it and file a police report, and then support my efforts to get more officers on the beat so that they can have a presence and be there when you need assistance. So I want to, I'm going to answer some questions that were in the chat, and then I'm going to go to, I think it's Angie. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So some of these questions were raised by Susie. One was, can we put pressure on the post office to clean up? We will look into that. That is a great idea. And I think if we can get them to help that corner, that would be excellent. You also asked about getting a dumpster. I think that is still under consideration by our public works director. We will talk more about that, because if you want to pilot, that concept of the gift cards and paying folks to bag their trash, they have to have a place to place them. So if we can talk more about that, I think, Susie, as a coordinating committee, and develop a plan for that. And then finally, there was the issue of, if we only have the sidewalks, we can't completely block them with art or planters. That's true. I'll just say this, that I asked our deputy city manager, what is our approach to this? And the planters that I showed you on Milvia, those are technically not in compliance with what you're allowed to place on the sidewalk, but it's a question of priority. And I've been told that if some of that is placed, but there's still space on the sidewalk for people to pass, that the city is not going to prioritize asking you to remove it. So that's it. That's sort of where we are with having something placed on the sidewalk. But of course, I don't think you would want to completely block the sidewalk, because you all have experienced that, and I don't think any of us wants that. So I hope that's helpful, and we can talk more about strategizing on some of those concepts with the coordinating committee. So Angie, please go ahead.
Hi. I have a different perspective that I want to bring to the conversation. One that I know is shared by many residents in the area who could not be here tonight. I lived at Urban Ottoman, and when I was there, I got to know a lot of the people who lived in the encampments nearby. And I understand that people, especially business owners, you know, are upset seeing trash and human waste and vandalism in the neighborhood. Nobody wants that. But my perspective is that unhoused people are our neighbors and they need to be treated that way. If we put the funds and the resources that we're putting into sweeping the encampments and policing the people in them, if those funds were put into ensuring them basic housing and sanitation structures, this would not be a problem. The encampments aren't the problem itself. The problem is much broader social issues. Homeless people shouldn't be treated as a problem. Also, the sweeps that's not a compassionate system and it's not effective. Like a lot of people kind of on the call have already said, most people will just come back or they'll move nearby because they have nowhere to go and it's not their fault. Sweeps really don't address the root of the issue and they don't improve circumstances for the people who are living in the encampments who are most impacted by this issue. Also, just telling people to go to shelters isn't really a viable long-term solution because a lot of people in encampments aren't eligible for shelters or that shelters aren't safe for them or they can go there for a night or two. There's COVID outbreaks, etc. In my opinion, the only way to really address this issue interpersonally, you know, while the resources get diverted for actual stable solutions for these people is to actually establish personal and responsive relationships with them because they're a part of the community. They're not in opposition to the community. They're community members. You can't make them disappear. And as a community member myself, I don't want to see more sweeps. I also have a question for those hosting this call, which is, are there any unhoused people on this call or anyone from the encampments? Were they informed? Were they invited? They are an integral part of this conversation and they can tell you what they need better than any of us can, what they need in order to keep a clean area or what they need in order to get off the streets, straight up. So that's my perspective. It's pretty different from some of the ones shared so far, but thanks.
Thank you, Angie. I appreciate hearing your perspective. I do want to say that, you know, I know you're calling it a sweep. I didn't get into a lot of detail here, but this action was taken out of a real concern about the health and safety of people who are outside right now. We had our environmental health officer write up a report about rat droppings found in very close proximity to tents. And there was a real concern that, you know, typhoid or other diseases could spread among the unhoused and the wider community if this action wasn't taken. And so I just want you to know and everyone on this call to know that this was about health and safety. And yes, when we address health and safety, we do always offer a shelter bed. You are right that that doesn't always feel like a great option. And so we are looking at providing more individualized shelter options. The city has purchased 30 pallet shelters, and we're going to be converting our Pathways Navigation Center that is a congregate model into a model where people will have their individualized space, because I think we can all recognize that that is a much more dignified way to shelter. And that's part of why, you know, sometimes people prefer to stay on the street because they feel that they can have more autonomy that way. So I do want to acknowledge that. And I do want to say that while I don't know, you know, the background of everybody who is on this call, but I certainly go out to the Gilman district regularly and talk to folks and interact with unhoused people. You know, it's important for me to hear people's experiences directly. And finally, I want to just say that the city of Berkeley, unlike Albany, you know, because somebody was raising Albany, has made an incredible investment in creating long-term housing for people who are unsheltered. In our district, we have submitted an application to the Home Key program with the state to create 44 permanent supportive housing units at the corner of Cedar and San Pablo at the Golden Bear Inn. We're going to hear about whether we succeeded with that application in a month or two. I really hope we are successful, because I think we all recognize that a shelter bed is not a long-term solution. We need to have more permanent housing solutions. So yes, we had to deal with health and safety yesterday, but I just want you, Angie, and all of us to be aware that the city of Berkeley works on the entire continuum of homeless services that are needed, from the shelter bed to the permanent supportive housing unit. But thank you very much for sharing your perspective. I think it's really important for us to hear it. I want to go to Allie next.
Hey guys. I come at this with a kind of unique perspective in that I run Blue Willow on the corner of 10th and Harrison. So the encampment, one of the encampments that was just cleaned out the other day, was literally on, you know, outside of my shop. And it's really nice that it's gone. It's kind of crazy to be able to see down the street.
Allie, can you try to turn off
when I
your
was a
video?
teenager,
'Cause you're
I lived in my car in West Berkeley. Can you guys hear me?
No, we can't hear you that well, Allie. Do you want to try to turn off your video or log out and log back in?
Can you hear me? Anybody? No.
We
I
can
think
hear
that's a
you
little better.
but if you could just maybe get to your,
Okay.
just ask your question, because it's just really hard to hear.
Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry, my son is watching. My son is watching a movie. Okay. Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now? No.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll even come back. Okay.
Okay, I think she's gonna, maybe she said she was gonna call back. Todd, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Rashi. Sorry I was a little late. I probably missed a few things. Happy to be on the coordinating committee. I think that's a great idea. Moving forward on that fast will just allow these, sort of all of the sort of webs of these conversations to move forward. There's a lot of ideas. So I think I just want to register a thank you, Rashi, and I appreciate your response to the person who talked, compassionately about the homeless people as neighbors. And if we do take that, I think that's a fair analogy. But when a neighbor is got an open sewer system right outside my house, I go talk to that person. And if that person's belligerent or not willing to do something, then I call the city. So let's just continue with that. Neighbors don't get to crap on your lawn. And that's my experience of what's happening now. And that's why we're having this phone call. And we've got problems. Of course, these issues are way bigger than Rashi and Beth and any of us can solve. These are systemic problems. These are global problems. So we're just, in the thick of it. Well, I have a homeless person that lives out on our street who I've gotten to know. She's clearly mentally ill, and we talk, and she's my neighbor. There are others that come and go and aren't interested in being neighborly, and are, leave terrible trash. But I would say that I do see a couple of things really quickly, and then I'll stop. I do see it's getting better, Rashi, on our street. So that's my experience, and I would say in the last, maybe since the shelter opened, the last but three months, it's just not as bad. We're just not having nearly as many people parking. And so I'll end with this. I'm excited about moving from, oh, we've got this desperate problem and this is all a big deal, to actually moving into a solution, which is, let's make this place, let's not just clean up the mess, let's make this a really great area. And I think part of being part of the coordinating committee, we could do that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Todd. Allie, I want to give you another chance. Let's see if we can hear you better.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, cool. I don't know if you heard what I was saying, but I run the shop on 10th and Harrison. And I used to live in my car in the same neighborhood as a teenager when I struggled with drug addiction. So I come at it with maybe a unique perspective. But it's been.
You muted yourself, Allie.
Sorry, I'm not good at the Zoom stuff, you guys. Basically, the encampment just got cleaned up in front of our shop, and I really appreciate it. However, some of the people who live there I've known since I was 17, so like half my life, back when I was in the same situation. I know that they're not going into a shelter because that's their choice, and that's fine. But there's other people who have serious problems with like drug addiction and mental health, and they come into my shop and start cursing and threatening us and yelling at us. And we've had 2 smashed windows in 2 weeks. The day after our first window got replaced, a guy came from I'm pretty sure he's the guy from the encampment, and smashed it right after the encampment got cleaned up. So I'm not sure if he was just like pissed about that or what the deal is. But you know, I've got people starting fires in our alcove in front of our door at night, and people, it's not great. I don't, you know, people are still going to be there, people are still going to do these things, but if I'm wondering, I'm all for like bright ass lights on Harrison Street just to like make it more visible and hopefully deter some things. I think that's like one solution that could help. I don't know if as a business district we would be able to fund like some sort of like nighttime security just to help keep an eye on things, because I'm really tired of going to my shop in the middle of the night to board up windows. If there was just like some sort of, I don't know, like visible presence in the neighborhood so that people didn't feel like it was like no man's land, it would make me feel a lot safer leaving my business every day. So it sucks that it's come to this, and I'm just trying to like hold on to my sanity. So but it did help being able to see it on the sidewalk. People are kind of tripping out about that because we've gotten so used to it. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Allie. I think, you know, you're not the only business that's struggling with the safety concern. So we will definitely circle back with the coordinating committee and try to figure out what we can do, especially overnight. Sounds like that's a big issue. Okay, I'm going to go to Fred, or I know Caroline, you were next, Caroline.
Thanks, Rashi, and thanks, Peter and Ronnie, our police officer here. Look, I really appreciate what you're doing. We really do. We appreciate that you did some cleanup. I can't imagine what kind of work and effort went into that. But I also hear you saying, just to be quite frank, that your hands are tied. That there's legal situations, there's macroeconomic, there's cultural, there's all sorts of things. And we heard Peter say, if they come back, they come back. That is the situation. That no matter how hard you try, there really isn't, at the end of the day, all that much you can do. So appreciate your help. And I know you're resource constrained and you have legal issues, but really, what can we do that will work? Let's think outside the box. If someone's suing you, can we sue? Can we sue this group that's suing you? Because I guarantee that everybody on this call has had their personal safety or their building threatened more than once. And that is a basic health and safety of your residents. That is equally important as the health and safety of the homeless, for whom I have a great deal of compassion, but my compassion ends where they're possibly burning down my building or threatening me or spreading disease. So I really want to get to what can we really do that will make a big difference? Can we block the sidewalks? Can we put blazing lights that are on 24/7? Can we play country music at 3 a.m.? Maybe there's some country music fans here. Don't, but something outside the box. I mean, can we really come up with some solutions here?
Caroline, I know that Peter said that I think it's a tile shop that's installing the lighting, correct? On the sidewalk. I think that's the south side of Harrison between 9th and 10th. So that is certainly within the scope of what's allowed. Officer Hartley is here. I don't know if he's actively here, if he's just listening and doing something else, but he's the one who recommended the lighting and I think fencing and other strategies to the tile shop. I don't know if he can speak to some of what you were asking.
Yes, I've been listening. Yeah, it's called CEPTED. So that's what she's referring to. The council member is crime prevention through environmental design. And so we've looked at things with lighting, which we've seen have helped in other situations, or fencing and other things to that effect. So I'd love to come down there and talk to some of the business owners or residents down there. But I'm all about thinking outside the box. I know we probably can't solve it right now in this Zoom meeting, but I'm always available. I'd love to think outside the box and see how we can strategize and come up with solving some of these issues. And I totally realize it's challenging trying to be good neighbors and understand and be compassionate, as well as trying to minimize the criminal behavior and activities. So trying to be super compassionate, I understand. But again, I'm willing to think outside the box and work with everyone and see how we can do this.
Thank you, Officer Hartley. And just to give you an example, we had a meeting last week with Officer Hartley with neighbors who live close to a church, also in District 1. They are having a problem with people loitering on the corner and drinking on the steps of the church and then getting violent and engaging in criminal activity. And what we've done at that corner is install temporary construction fencing. It's just the cyclone fencing. So it wasn't that expensive, but it was just something to discourage people from hanging out on the church steps. And so that's what we tried over there. So, we can look at, your particular property and what we can do to try to use those strategies. And I think, Officer Hartley, are you able to actually go out and consult on this and give our business community advice?
Yes, I am. I'll put my email in the chat here. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'd love to come out. We'll walk around your business, your specific location, and we'll come up with strategies. I'll tell you what things that other agencies or what we've done throughout the city that have worked. And I'm all ears. I'm really open to this challenging time and challenging location that we're at.
Thank you so much, Officer Hartley. I know some folks are dropping off. I want to make sure we get to everyone who had their hand raised. So Fred, do you want to go ahead and then maybe we can wrap up unless anyone else has a question. Go ahead, Fred. You're muted.
There you go. No, I'm not muted. So I'm glad to see Todd here on the call. He and I have been threatening to talk to each other for a while, and finally we're doing it on the long distance of this event. But hey, we've got a lot of challenges. I've been in this district for like 12 years, and I'm trying to ramp up and seeing what I can do to try to really promote the idea of a business improvement district, a BID here. And Rashi says she's already got some other volunteers. So let's see what we can do to move that forward. Let's try to see what we can do to solve a lot of these other, some systemic problems, which are really serious. I'm all in as much as I can. I'm a small business guy. I run a little, graphics organization, but we're doing some stuff that's meaningful and helpful. So I'd be up for any suggestions, anything that I can do to help improve the situation. I think it would make a big difference for people on this call if you folks could get off your phones and have your actual image, your face here. Makes a big difference. Then we can see who we're talking to. That may be a small matter, but I think it matters a lot when you're trying to relate to people. So that's my take for the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred. I am just going to briefly just tell you all who is on that coordinating committee so far, just so you know. It's Todd Jersey,
Yep.
Caroline Winnett,
Yep.
Fred Fassett, Kathy Dennison, Julie McCrae,
Julie,
and
yes,
Susie
Julie's
Medak.
Julie-
So
primary mover in this thing.
thank you to everybody who volunteered. You know, I will be working with that group, and then we will, as needed, we may, you know, call these larger meetings for specific issues when we need broader input. But I just want to thank you all so much, because we cannot change and improve the Gilman district without your partnership. So I do thank you for being engaged, and thank you to our city folks who took time out of their evening to join us tonight. And we will be in touch with all of you, and let us know if you didn't catch Officer Hartley's email and you want to do the crime prevention through environmental design consultation. You know, we can get you that as well. Okay, everybody, have a great evening.
Thank you.